Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football after the Seahawks win against the Miami Dolphins at home, 24-3. Probably should have been more than that if the offensive line got out of their own way, and all the penalties. Seahawks dominated, I thought, this in this game from start to finish. Miami looked pathetic at times. They as bad as our offense was in the second and third quarters, Miami's offense kept pace with us and was just as bad. But the defense really was stole the show for me in this game. It was a great performance overall, allowing 202 total yards of offense against Miami, and a couple of backup quarterbacks. But the defense really kind of did what it needed to do to help the offense along the way to really keep this game out of reach the entire way. Welcome in, Keith. It's good to see you again. I've been gone for a couple weeks and now back into the rhythm of this thing. It was exciting to see this game live for the first time this season. I've seen the other two games on tape, but it's good to be here with you and looking forward to the show.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It's been an eventful couple of weeks with you being gone. Luckily, Dana O'Gorman came in and filled in and did her typical awesome job, and grateful to have her to be able to come on and help us out. And but yeah, it's good to have you back. And this is an interesting game for us to talk about for your first game back, because there's a lot to like and a lot to dislike, and in the end, it doesn't matter. It's a win, and that's what matters.
3-0, baby. I'll take it. I mean, I'll take it. At this time of the season, the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you're working shit out, and your team is somewhat undisciplined still. You haven't quite figured out your identity. You're trying to establish that. I thought that was pretty evident with the offense in the second and third quarters. Thought they came out really fast and strong to begin the game, and then they just lost it. They lost the momentum. Penalties started to creep in. Holding calls. Anthony Bradford had a couple penalties in a row. The offensive drives were just killed. The third down conversions, I think at one point we were like 1 for 10. We ended up at 3 for 11. And just, it was discombobulated as far as trying to build anything. I said at one time to you on a text, I thought that we should have scored like close to 40 points at some point in the third quarter based on how we performed in the first quarter. I thought we could pretty much get anything done that we needed to get done. It just didn't happen. We just got in our own way, really. And the defense just saved it.
Yeah, the offense got sloppy in a lot of ways. They didn't have any sense of urgency. I think they seemed to understand that Miami was not going to score. You're up by 14. Miami's not going to score 2 touchdowns with their backup quarterback, period.
Right. They scored 5 touchdowns total in a couple of seasons with him at the quarterback position. On like 50 some odd drives. They've had 5 touchdowns. So they weren't going to score.
That was earlier in the game when you sent me that. And so it's like 64 drives now with him and 5 touchdowns. They were not going to put up points on Seattle's defense. And it was like Seattle's offense knew that and just relaxed too far.
And I think that was the disappointing thing for me. Like the takeaway in this game. Now the takeaway should be Seattle's 3-0. We won by 21 points. It was a blowout. It was not even as close as the score. All that should be the highlight, the headlines, really. The headline for me is offense disappoints for, 2/3 of this game. And I'd love to see the consistency there. We haven't yet seen it for a complete game this season yet. I think this would have been the game. I think Miami's defense, even at the end, they just gave up. But it's interesting. They're close, but man, that offensive line, Keith, we need to talk about the offensive line.
Yeah. I want to say one thing before we start to nitpick, and that is an ugly win counts just as much as a pretty win. In the end, what matters is that you win, and this team's 3-0. Does that?
Wow.
Like, are there reasons to not be excited because you're thinking, oh, this is just going to cave in on itself? Sure. But they beat a bad team. And when you're a good team, you should always beat the bad team in front of you. And that's what they did. And I think
they came away with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a 21 point blowout. So it's like, at what point are we nitpicking small things that maybe don't matter as much?
I tell you why we nitpick. And I believe this. We nitpick because we care so much, A. And B, you can see the potential of this team. Like, they're way ahead of schedule on the defensive side. And this offense was already supposed to be good. The only thing that's holding them back, I think, from really blowing teams out is that offensive line. So really, as far as nitpicking, that's really kind of my only complaint is they really kind of put together some drives in the second and third quarter specifically. The offensive line had too many penalties. I thought they kind of killed some drives. But you're right. Like, we're 3-0. We've got an excellent foundation of a team here that's got a real opportunity, and we go back to like the predictions we did at the beginning of the year. I predicted a win in this week. I can't remember, Keith, where you were at on this. If this was one of the first losses you had.
I did. I had them winning the first two and then losing this one in next week and falling to 2-2.
Right.
Of course, when
at quarterback.
That was with Tua at quarterback and not Skylar Thompson. So I would have definitely picked a Seattle win had I known that it would have been Skylar Thompson. But yeah, I mean, this was a game that they should have won and they won.
So, so let's talk about the good stuff. Let's not nitpick and let's wait for that in a little bit later. But I do want to get back to the offensive line. The defense. So the defense comes into this game with the number 6 overall defense. Now, you take a look at strength of opponent and so forth. You've just got to be able to play the team that's in front of you. And the first 2 weeks, the Seahawks come out of that as a 6th ranked defense, number 2 ranked overall pass defense. And they just basically annihilated the Dolphins as well. Allowed 202 overall yards, 140 passing yards, 65 rushing yards, 3 points. This defense is going to be ranked even higher coming out of this game than number 6 overall. I mean, this defense looks to me like it kind of carried this game in a sense, and it looks like it can kind of win games for you.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Like this, we said we're going to stick to the positives. So, with the defense, like the 6 sacks in this game, and that's not just the story. It's not just 6 sacks. It's another 10, 12 pressures.
Yeah, at least, right?
They were, according to the broadcast team, they had the highest pressure rate of any team in the NFL coming into this game. And their pressure rate on this game was much higher than it had been in the other games. Like, the pass defense is good. It's legit. And they did it in this game without, some important players. They still haven't had a game with Uchenna Nwasu.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you talk about players that kind of stood out for me on the defensive side in this game. I've got to start with Tyrese Knight. I mean, Tyrese Knight was playing all over the place and really kind of making up for some bad tackling up front on a few different things. And he was really kind of playing close to the line of scrimmage and not allowing plays to get behind him. I thought he played well. Derek Hall, the kid is really just kind of coming out this year. Showed a little bit last year, flashed in a few games, but overall just really looked out of place. You could say that about half the defense last year, scheme-wise. Just, not necessarily against him. But this year, man, talk about a success story early in the season. Derek Hall's really showing out. I thought Julian Love played well again. Tyrell Dodson had an excellent sack that really kind of made a difference in their the other opposing quarterback. eventually left the game. I think it was because of that hit that he had on him. Boy, Mafe looks good. Draymond Jones, I thought, was very active today and looked good. Jerron Reed, of course, Devin Witherspoon. Devin had a penalty, maybe even 2 in this game, and I thought at least one was undeserved. But overall, the defense is very active. They look to be very disciplined. Yes, Dolphins had a few explosive plays overall, but really nothing significant. I mean, they scored 3 points. Those were gifted to them closer to the Seahawks end zone. And otherwise, they pitched a shutout in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up, what was it, 1 third down conversion in the entire game?
Yep.
I mean, it's like, you can go through just like line item by line item on a box. 12. Yeah, on a box score, and just everything. On 4th down. Everything is impressive about what this happened here. I mean, the only thing they didn't get was a turnover. But okay, like it's not like they gave up yards or points. So
right. And they have an explosive offense. I mean, you take the quarterback out of the equation, obviously, but they've got some players over there that can make plays. And if they get the ball into open space, they can do some damage. They did a couple of plays, but nothing really out of second line containment. So nothing past like 25 yards. And only
I mean, you look at like Tyreek Hill, who's one of the most explosive players in the entire NFL. 3 receptions, 40 yards. Right. Jalen Waddle, also one of the extremely explosive player, 4 catches, 26 yards.
Well, Skylar Thompson was 13 and 19 for 107 yards.
Yeah. D. Eskridge had 1 catch for 30 yards. Just throwing that out there. He didn't get hurt either. So,
I thought that 1 catch he had was actually a really nice catch. And some yards
it was a really nice catch. It's one of those things.
I was like, man, it's too bad that kid couldn't have shown up, for the Seahawks, but good for him. I'm glad he had a chance to play and make a play.
Yeah.
You look at their run game. Now, Dolphins really never got into it. Seattle got up early, and then the Dolphins basically kind of gave up on that.
But they weren't. It wasn't working when they tried.
Right. Yeah.
11 carries for 30 yards.
Yeah, 2.7 yards per carry for their main running back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the defense is legit. We're going to be talking about this all year. Now, let's talk briefly about the real first test. They haven't had a test yet, but Detroit's coming up, and that'll be something. That's going to be the test. Now Detroit's going to get their yards and so on and so forth. I would really like to see the Seahawks kind of turn into some sort of turnover machine. To me, that's kind of where they've been lacking a little bit. Now they've gotten their isolated interceptions and so forth, but really love to see them knock the ball out. They hit hard. I think it's just a matter of time before they have some forced fumbles as part of the stat sheet. I think the interceptions will come. I'd love to see them in that really important game. I'd love to see the defense just kind of take over against a really strong offense to show that they're legit. That would be something. Now, as far as the offense is concerned, Keith, let's talk about what ails this team. I thought, given the circumstances, Geno looked really good and played well, especially early and then late, leading that late drive. In fact, we texted right before that. I said, I'm going to pull my fingernails out if they get a safety on this thing when they were backed up to on the 2-yard line. And then my next text to you was, or Geno Smith's going to lead him on a 98-yard touchdown drive, and that would be on brand as well.
And he led him on a 98-yard touchdown drive, which was
sure enough.
Yeah.
Right. So, but let's talk about the offense. So what did you see that you liked in the first quarter compared to the second and third quarter specifically?
Well, really you look at, I like that they were getting the ball, to their best players. They were getting the ball in Metcalf's hands, and, trying to mix it around. They got it to Lockett a lot today. I liked those kind of things that they were doing on offense. They ran the ball. They they didn't do play action as much as I kind of expected them to in this game, but they did run the ball, and especially it paid off late in the game when they were able to just start to really grind it out. And
I thought Zach Charbonnet ran really hard today.
He ran really well in the second half. In the first half, I don't want to say he ran poorly. He just didn't have the opportunities. There was a lot more guys in the backfield. Blocking wasn't as strong. Yeah, I mean, it was, he looked more explosive than he has. It really started, you could tell he was just getting in that rhythm where he was starting to run guys over, starting to show that power, but also getting where he was bouncing more, where he was getting, and not just running straight into contact and being tackled. He was like actually creating separation. And there's just a lot to like about what we saw from him and, the rest of the skill position players.
Yeah. And the other one I wanted to single out too was Noah Fant. I thought the use of tight ends in this game, and Farrell Brown on a couple of different options, and Barner had a nice catch too to continue a drive, a third down conversion. Noah Fant had 6 catches for 60 yards. I thought each one of those were really good kind of sustaining drive plays from Geno Smith. I think he looked at him quickly and often and went to him without hesitation. Noah Fant was open. I think that's a kind of a tribute to DK Metcalf, Lockett, and Jigba as well, because those guys were being double teamed on the regular. And so Noah did have his opportunities. That Zach Charbonnet catching the ball out of the backfield was a factor. AJ Barner ended up with 3 catches for 13 yards, something like that. And Kenny McIntosh came in late to kind of give Charbonnet a little breather there on the last drive and picked up that key first down to close out the game. I thought overall they did what they needed to do, but I was disappointed in the penalties, and I was disappointed in the blocking, specifically the pass blocking. It just wasn't. It killed drives, and you have a potent offense with a lot of weapons and a quarterback that's really playing well so far in the season, and you have that kind of play out of your offensive line. It's just so disappointing. It's like it's aggravating. It's aggravating to watch because that they could. You're one explosive play away. I mean, it's one of those things that if Geno just had that time, it would be a little different. Although I will say this, Geno also held the ball a couple times, too long, and caused a sack on his own, I think, once. And then you mentioned the interceptions early. So tell me what you saw in the offense that you liked. I know that you talked about that, but maybe you can kind of key in on that 98-yard drive to close out the game, and then what you didn't like and what frustrated you.
Once the offense started to shake off the doldrums of the second and third quarter, and they started playing with more pace, and Geno started getting the ball out of his hands quickly, the offense started moving. Now they lost a couple of drives that didn't get a chance to finish because of some stupid penalties and all of that. But overall, when Geno's getting the ball out of his hands, the offense looks pretty good because it backs the team up, and then they were able to let Charbonnet just pound it right at him, and it just became one of those things where the offense just worked really well. The problem just was that there was too many guys getting in on Geno's face way too fast. And some of the pressures he created by holding onto the ball, but some of it also, like, there was just some really bad blocking. Charbonnet is struggling to get the running game going in the first half. That a lot of that was just some really bad blocking. Tomlinson has not been good now through 3 games. I think that the countdown until when Haynes becomes a fixture on this offensive line is we're getting down there. It's getting pretty low, but it's not like Bradford on the other side was better. So where do you bring Haynes in? Because you could bring him in for either spot.
Well, okay, so let's be real here and let's talk about this. I agree with you on both counts, Bradford and Tomlinson, especially Bradford to me. Now, the gap between Bradford and Haynes has got to be pretty good, Keith, in order for them not to go with Haynes full time and allow Bradford to still have these setbacks. Like he's penalized, I think, 7 times in 3 games, of which many cause drives to be killed because now you're 1st and 15 or 3rd and 20 or whatever it is, holding false starts, etc.
A lot of 2nd and 20s.
And so at what point do you just commit to the kid and just live with some things that aren't necessarily any worse than Bradford and just move forward with him? Or do you replace Tomlinson? I think you end up leaving the vet that's playing next to Connor Williams. And I think over on the other side, you allow Haynes to replace Bradford. And then you're hoping Lucas comes back at week 5. It looks like it's probably going to be week 8 if he does come back. But I'm looking for that continuity, but not at the expense of really poor play and drive killing penalties.
Yeah, and getting Lucas back would be helpful, but George Fant had a setback on Friday, and he's now on injured reserve and not going to be available until late October. So now you're looking at one of those 2 guys needs to come back eventually to help rescue the team at right tackle. That's not a good spot to be in.
And Michael Jarrell was on the inactive list today. That's what they think about him, so he's not going to be any help this year.
Yeah, probably not, at least not for a while, but he was a project, a massive project when they drafted him. I mean, he was never expected to be a contributor this year. So I'm not that concerned about that in terms of his development or anything, but it comes down to the fact that they thought they were going to have Abe Lucas, and that hasn't happened. They signed Fant to be a backup plan in case Lucas couldn't happen, and that's not happening either. They're stuck with Forsyth, who hasn't been good, and with him and Tomlinson being, and Bradford, I mean, that's 60% of your offensive line that's been poor. You're not gonna have consistency on offense when it's like that. There just isn't an answer on the roster. This isn't something that they can just go and make a change and have everything be fixed, because it's 60% of the offensive line. Getting Haynes in there, I think, would help. But how much? He's still going to be a rookie. He's still going to make mistakes. There's still going to be penalties.
They only allowed 3 sacks, and Gino passed for 270 yards. So I want to keep things in perspective. Gino was 26 to 34. And Zach Charbonnet had 18 carries for 91 yards. So yeah, but I need to temper this a little bit, but
I know, but I'm just also saying you got to look at
against Miami.
It is, which is not a good defensive team.
Not a good defensive team at all.
Look at how they did on 3rd down, where they had, 3 of 11 or 3 of 12?
3 of 11
on 3rd down, and then they went 2 quarters where they had like 1 first down in 2 quarters. Like that's not a consistency level that's going to allow you to win against better teams. So the
other thing I'm concerned about a little bit, to be completely honest, I don't want to jinx anything or whatever, but I would be concerned a little bit about like the health of Geno Smith long term with the way that the offensive line is playing. Now, they either get in front of somebody or whatever and slow somebody down, or sometimes they just allow a guy to completely come through untouched. And those are the concerning things for me. Something's not happening up front. Maybe it's Connor Williams is still learning the offense a little bit, hasn't completely gotten into the blocking scheme portion of learning the playbook, and isn't recognizing, blitzes and exotic things yet. And maybe that's going to get better. I would put that then on Geno's hands to be able to either change out of a play, call a timeout, or get rid of the ball quick. There was one play there. I think you and I talked about it just briefly on a text where it was like, that was on Gino, where he got sacked in like less than 2 seconds because he didn't get out of the play and didn't recognize the scheme on the defensive side and allowed that to happen.
Oh yeah. You could see that they were coming. They had more people coming than you had blockers for. And then somebody missed a block, which is inexcusable in that situation, but that's another point. But you knew there were going to be guys coming like clean, and you didn't either change the play, change the blocking assignments, or just get the ball to your hands fast enough. Like, you've got to see that. You got to make the adaptation that's required there, and good quarterbacks do that. And maybe it was a situation where he thought he had something that didn't materialize fast enough for him, or I don't know. But you look at that and you're like, that's something you gotta see that coming, and you gotta fix it, because that's part of your job as a quarterback.
And that came after a long string of ineffective offensive play, for a couple of quarters. And that was kind of the last time that was really ineffective, is when that happened. It just kind of got him out of that drive, and it was ugly. Let's talk about the win, though. So this puts Seattle at 3-0. They're looking very good in the division. I don't know, we can look this up, but I don't know the score of the 49er Rams game. But those two teams kind of beating up on each other, it doesn't really matter at this point. Seattle looks to be in the driver's seat early in this division. Are you confident enough after 3 games on the defensive side of what we're seeing is real?
On the defensive side, yeah, I am. I mean, I would look at that and I would say, that the giving up all those running yards against New England is a little bit concerning, but they've just been so good against the pass, and it is a passing league in terms of ultimately, like, you need to be better against the pass. Like, you have to be good against the pass. And I think that they are showing that they are. And so, yeah, I think like there's a lot to like here. And they're going to get healthier. That's the other thing. You're going to get Nuasu back. You're going to get your linebackers healthy.
I will say Williams and Murphy left the game and didn't return after halftime.
Yeah.
It sounds like Murphy's got a hamstring.
It was a hamstring, and with Williams, I thought they also said it was a hamstring. So hopefully they'll be back and it won't be a big deal, but we'll see. I mean,
I think that was precautionary for sure.
Yeah. Hamstrings also, if you let them, they will linger. So,
so next week, not to jump too far ahead, they face Dan Campbell and the Lions. Now, Seattle's been pretty effective and successful against the Lions the last 2 seasons as the Lions have been ascending. And now that the Lions are ascended and they are predicted to be in the NFC Championship game, all that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they'll fare next week? We travel, and it's a good team. It's a good test early in the season. This is why they play the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is why they, this is going to be a real test for them, because this is a good team. It's a well-coached team with a lot of talent on offense. And if Seattle's defense can really take it to Detroit with all of that talent that they've got, then that this is not just a really good defense. This is a legit elite defense. And so it is kind of a test game for them. They also need to be able to do enough offensively to give them a shot to win the game.
Yeah. Now that's the key, Keith, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the defense is top 5. I really do. I think this defense it would shock me after seeing what I'm seeing if this defense ends up outside of the top 10.
I would agree.
It wouldn't shock me at all if they end up being a top 5 team after being ranked number 27, 28 last year. Like, they're making a huge leap this year with similar talent. And it just goes to show how important scheme is in coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Lions have improved on defense as well. I mean, they've got DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil in the middle there on the defensive line. They've got Marcus Davenport and Aiden Hutchinson, and they've got Jack Campbell at middle linebacker. They're a tough-nosed defense. They're going to make you work for every yard, all that kind of stuff. Now, their offense is their offense, and that. But I feel like the defense can neutralize the offense to where I think this game really does come down to, can Seattle score with the Lions? And we've predicted these games a couple of years in a row as being high-scoring affairs. And I don't see any reason to change that in this game to a certain extent. But I think Seattle is going to be a little bit more stingy on defense than they have been in the past.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun
I would
game.
agree.
Fun game.
I mean, it'll be a fun game. This is an important game. This is one of those games where you're playing on the road against one of the top teams in your conference. This is a legit Super Bowl contending team that they're playing against. If Seattle can go on the road and win, then be ready for this to be a really fun season for the Seahawks.
I think so.
If Seattle goes on the road here and keeps it close, that's still a great sign for a young team that's going through all these wholesale changes this year. Now, if they go on the road here in this game and they get blown out, then honestly, we might be looking at, okay, maybe we are underselling just how poor the competition has been these first 3 games. So I think this is an important game.
That's a great way to put it. No, that's a great way to put it. I mean, those are 3 legit scenarios that can play out in this game and everything in between, because these 2 teams, I think, are now Seattle's up and coming. I had them at 12 wins. That was my prediction. I was outside I was the outlier, if you will, on that. Although I still like that prediction after 3 weeks. But most folks had them anywhere between 9 and 10, 11 wins on the upside.
Mm-hmm.
And this game, you're right, it's like one of those defining moment games. Early, it's very early, but I think it really does tell you where you were at as a team. And if we come away with a win, I don't even care how it happens, whatever. A win is a win when you're facing the Lions on the road. And if we end up 4-0 out of this thing, this could be a very special season, because after the Lions, I mean, the schedule really doesn't get that much more difficult. It's I think most of the games are kind of even spread as far as who's going to get favored. After the Lions, it's the Giants at the Seahawks. I think that's a win. 49ers at the Seahawks. I think 49ers have shown some vulnerability. The injury bug is not in their favor this year.
No, yeah, they're not just some of their most important players. So, and that's the same thing with the
Deebo Samuel, McCaffrey.
Yeah,
right.
And the Rams are running into similar problems where it's some of their best and most important players are the ones that are out. So,
if we come away with the wins against the Lions, I think it could be a shock the world type of a moment, and Seattle is really it will no longer be in the shadows, I think, and that'll be a kind of a new way of approach on how he kind of it's a young team, and so you've got to have that responsibility to be able to kind of carry that weight of being respected and earning that respect. And we'll see how that goes. I thought along in this game, there were a couple times where I thought, this team's got a ways to go as far as team discipline is concerned. I'm not talking about necessarily the penalties per se. I'm talking about the way that they stepped on the gas pedal in the first quarter, didn't sustain into the second and third. I thought they lost their edge on offense. It just kind of went away. The urgency, you mentioned it earlier, the urgency just left them. And they just said, we're going to just let the defense play. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling. And I know it's part of that growing process, so I'm not too concerned about it, but I would like to see them show up for the full 4 quarters at some point this season. And it would be great if it was against the Lions. I think that's a good wrap, Keith. I really had fun coming back and being on the show again, because it's fun, and I missed it. I missed you. I'm glad that Dana was able to come in, and you guys put out a few good shows. So that's awesome. I know you went solo on your first one out, which is always not easy to do. So
yeah, that's a little weird.
I appreciate you.
That's always a little weird trying to go solo, but couldn't be helped.
Especially after 590 some odd episodes of having 2 people. Yeah. It's like all of a sudden it's like, what do you do? Plus you normally don't do all the back, the production stuff as well. So that adds to it. It's just, but so I appreciate everything you do.
We definitely need to mention that Bill, doesn't take enough credit for doing all of the post-production, and everything on all of our shows. And, it's more work than I think people realize. It's not just a matter of that we're done and then you just hit upload and and you send it. There is work to be done on all of that. And so it's, Bill does all of it. So it's, important stuff, and very much appreciated.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you kind of taking that on for me so I could get out of Dodge for a few weeks, and enjoyed my time. I was over in Europe. It was a blast, and very memorable trip. So enjoyed that part. The timing though, I can't take the blame for the timing, Keith. I would have never scheduled that thing in the 1st of September. I just need people to know that. But I'm not gonna throw her under the bus. But also, it's NFL season, so
yeah,
don't do that. Don't do that again. Don't do that. So let's get out of here. We'll get back to you this week. We'll have a proper preview of the Detroit Lions game coming up next weekend. That should be just so much fun. I mean, this season is going to be fun. Now, these tight games and these games where you're not performing as well as you want to in certain areas, they make you all kind of jittery and tense up a little bit, but that's the good stuff. I mean, that's when your team is competitive and you're playing for the postseason, and you get a little nervous, and so it's all good. It's all good. So follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You can follow the show at Seahawks Playbook on Twitter, Seahawks Playbook podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, and our own YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, share it, leave comments, all that good stuff. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.